Hi, today I just want to discuss a little bit about this word that perhaps your English teacher uses an awful lot of in class, this word that perhaps you see on an awful lot of mark schemes, perception. You can see here at the top of all of the mark schemes, so question 2, 3 and 4 on the language paper, perceptive is an adjective which features quite prominently. It's right at the top. Do we know what perception is though? And do we know how we become perceptive? A quick look at an online dictionary tells us that perception is defined as the ability to see, hear or become aware of something through the senses, but it is also a word that means the way in which something is regarded, understood and interpreted. And I'm looking specifically at that second definition today, the way in which something is regarded, understood and interpreted. And I want to take this time to empower you a little bit, to help you to view your own perception of the text as the most important view of the text. Possibly even once the text is created, your view of the text is more important than the writer's. And I just want to spend a little bit of time talking about that today. So here are a bunch of butterflies. I'm sure that's not the appropriate collective noun, but nevertheless it's the one I used. You can see here that there are lots of different butterflies, and we can apply that word with confidence. In front of us there are butterflies. When you're looking at this image of butterflies though, you may be able to spot key differences between them, perhaps their colour. If you are colourblind, you might view these butterflies very differently to how I view them. If you have poor eyesight, like I am developing at the moment, you might struggle to see the smaller ones, but the larger butterflies might burst out at you. If you're really interested in tessellations, you might be interested in how the butterflies fit together, or don't in some cases. If you're interested in, artistry, then you might be interested in the patterns that they show. Certain butterflies will be of more interest to you than others. And this is because we all have a different way of seeing things. We want to go beyond saying that they're butterflies. We want to be able to identify which of the butterflies are most meaningful, most beautiful, most interesting to us. And I want to empower you to be able to do that, to, make your own viewpoint very clear in your writing. I think it's really important that one of the things we perceive is that language has great value and great variety. In Hamlet, Polonius asks Hamlet when he's walking around with a book of poetry, he says, "What do you read, my lord?" And Hamlet replies quite dismissively, "Words, words, words." Of course, from my perspective as an English teacher, this line of Hamlet's is incredibly rife with irony, because words are not they're not the same. Every single word has a different set of connotations and meanings and value systems, and a poem is not just words, it's so much more than that. So I want to kind of get to grips with that, and I'm going to show you in a second one example of how language has more variety than perhaps you might initially expect. Right, this is something I feel quite passionately about, so I'm just going to read this off the screen for you. When we write, we shouldn't strive to use the longest word. What we should strive to do is use the right word which has the precise connotations for what we're intending, whether it's we're intending a certain mood or we're intending a certain flavour of characterisation. It's about picking the word that just hits the nail on the head, that gets the point across in the best way. And in the same way, when we're doing analysis, when we read, we should strive to understand why great writers select to use the words that they do. Every word has a set of connotations or associations which enrich our understanding of character, our impressions of the novel's story world, and our relationship with the narrative. So we should really we should really, when we zoom in, we should zoom in on the words that have that spectrum of meaning, which allow us to really get a rich interpretation of literature or of non-fiction if we're looking at paper 2 language. So when we zoom in, it's about finding the moment where the writer has really picked a word that has that set of connotations which are of interest to us and which generate meaning for us. So you can see here, for example, I just typed into thesaurus.com the word sad, and I could use any one of those words within my writing to describe, say, a character who's sad, and every single one of them would make my character different. So quick activity for you. In a minute or a few seconds, I want you to pause. Look at these different lexical choices which a writer could use to say their character is sad. What are the different connotations these different words or phrases hold? Do it now. Okay, now you've had a little look at some of the words that I've included on the screen. Hopefully you've been able to see that if I use, for example, the phrase down in the dumps, I'm creating a much different mood and a much different character to if I choose to describe my hero as grief-stricken. If I suggest that my character is down in the mouth, that's very temporary. If I suggest that my character is disconsolate, that means they can't be consoled. That is very permanent. So it's important that we see that any word we use has the potential to change the meaning of a text and change the meaning of a character and change the meaning of a setting. That is the power of the language which we are using. So here's a very famous example of a literary text. This is an extract from Frankenstein, which I teach at GCSE, and you can see here that I've highlighted 4 words. These are not the words that students often pick out when I give them this extract to analyse. I think that's because a lot of my students are looking for the best word. Okay, so quite a lot of the time when I give students this extract, they pick out horror. And perhaps they pick out horror because there's some really clear, obvious points they can say. If Frankenstein is starting from his sleep in horror, he's probably quite frightened about what he's done. If he's starting from his sleep in horror, this is a Gothic convention. But these are very easy and superficial points. If I was going to use that quote, it would very much be my jumping off point. It wouldn't be my destination of analysis. The words I've highlighted here are the words on which my understanding of the character Frankenstein are hinged. And when I say hinged, I mean that when I read those words, my understanding of the character changes, it develops, I've learnt more about him. So you can see here I've highlighted, for example, the verb escaped. I could pick the verb rushed, but it's the verb escaped that has really powerful connotations. It implies that the monster is a threat. It implies that Frankenstein could become a victim. And therefore, it has really important connotations. At this point, the monster has not done anything. I've also highlighted the adverb seemingly. Now, most of my students, when they look at this extract, they highlight the verb detain, because that means to imprison, and which is a Gothic convention and definitely worth spotting. But the adverb seemingly highlights Frankenstein's subjective perspective. This is what he thinks the monster is going to do. It is not what the monster is going to do. And this is where we come into the notion of the biased representation. And this is furthered with the adjective inarticulate. Instead of sounds, instead of, I don't know, moans, the monster makes inarticulate sounds. And that word is really interesting to me because as an English teacher, even though I'm going to fuddle a lot of my words here, I think of myself as quite articulate. And you should too. But the monster is inarticulate because he hasn't received the education or the nurture that I have done and that you have done. That adjective tells me the monster's innocent. It tells me that the monster is not what Frankenstein seems to see him as. I can also pick out, for example, the fact that his grin wrinkles his cheeks. And that verb is really ugly. It's very repulsive. And therefore, hinging upon that is my understanding of Frankenstein's prejudice against people who are not beautiful. So you can see that I've not picked the obvious words. I've picked words on which my understanding of the character of Frankenstein hinges. It's where I learn more, where something new is developed in that characterization. This is what perceptive language analysis does. Another way of approaching language analysis and endeavouring to be perceptive is to look for patterns, and this is very much something that we do in language and literature in combination at A level. So I've highlighted here a series of different patterns, and what you can do is you can look for patterns that create impressions, that create moods, that create a feeling or an idea as you're reading. So this is a very famous extract. It's taken from Great Expectations. It's at the trial of Magwitch, and it's one of my favourite passages that Dickens writes. And at this moment, you can see I've highlighted in yellow that there is a semantic field of light. You can't just have semantic field. You can't say, oh, there's a semantic field. This is a semantic field of light. We're looking for a set of words which share a meaning, a semantic. Okay, so sun, glittering, shaft, light are all individual words which we could link by having that semantic field of light. What's the impression of that? Well, this light for a moment links together the character of the judge, the jury. It suggests that everybody is moving towards the death which Magwitch is shortly going to experience. It's a moment of hope before a hopeless situation. It's bittersweet and it's poignant, and it makes what happens afterwards so upsetting, because after that shaft of beautiful light and glittering raindrops and the sun, this is the moment where Magwitch accepts that he's going to die. I can look for grammatical patterns. You can see here in this long sentence, and Dickens likes a long sentence, that there is a grammatical pattern. I'll read it out for you, but you can see I've highlighted in green where the sentence is structured in quite a similar way. Then they were all formally doomed, and some of them were supported out, and some of them sauntered out with a haggard look of bravery, and a few nodded to the gallery, and 2 or 3 shook hands, and others went out chewing the fragments of herb they had taken from the sweet herbs lying about. He went last of all. So you can see at this point we have quantifiers, so some, few, 2 or 3. We have pronouns others, he, all of which introduce the verb. So throughout this sentence and with the sentence that follows, you've got some syntactic parallelism, or what your teachers might have perhaps taught you as parallel phrasing. And what this does is it builds and it builds and it builds up to the moment where Magwitch leaves. He went last of all. So you get a suggestion of the variety of people who have been doomed to die in this court case. And in that variety, it's Magwitch that sticks out, because from Dickens' perspective and from the character of Pip's perspective, he's the narrator here, you understand Magwitch's importance to Pip. Okay. You can also look for phonological patterns, and when I say phonological, that's just a really fancy way of saying things that sound similar. So you can see here at the end of that long list of people moving out of the court, describing how they move out the court, you've got phonological patterning of the alliteration describing Magwitch. So Magwitch goes, having to be helped from his chair. He goes very slowly, and he held my hand. And this phonological feature, this repetition of the alliterative H, having to be helped, he held my hand, emphasizes important representation of Magwitch, that at this point he's vulnerable physically. At this point he's not a threat to society, and therefore it makes the pronunciation of his coming death incredibly upsetting. So you also have to attempt to be perceptive when you are completing question 3, which looks at structural analysis. And obviously in this circumstance, the wrong thing to do would be to zoom in on individual lexical choices of the writer and analyse, their connotations and associations, because you're not studying language, you're studying structure. The best way to approach or attempt to be perceptive when we're answering this question is to look for foreshadowing. Foreshadowing is a hint early on the text at something that might be manifested towards the denouement of the text. So you can see on the screen here, I have used the extract, which you may have been doing in your Year 11 classes. This is from a Catherine Mansfield short story about Rosabelle. If you're not in Year 11 and you are interested, if you speak to any English teacher, they'll be able to share this text with you. And the way that I would approach foreshadowing and looking for foreshadowing is perhaps to think about the metaphor of the acorn and the oak tree. If we are a good writer, we do not necessarily want to pull the rug out from underneath a reader's feet because we don't want a shock ending that does not seem realistic or plausible. So we do always leave these little hints or breadcrumbs throughout the narrative to suggest how it might be properly resolved. So let's have a look at the Rosabelle extract and we'll be able to see how foreshadowing works and how it works in a perceptive way. So at the top of the extract, you can see that Rosabelle is described as desiring to sacrifice her soul for a good dinner. She's that hungry. She looks at jewellery shops and she thinks of them as fairy palaces. I can't speak. But she goes on the bus and she's also repulsed by the people who are on the bus with her. She describes a sickening smell of humanity. And then towards the end of the text, we have, in the very last few lines, Rosabelle reacting to a very privileged woman in her hat shop, feeling this sudden ridiculous feeling of anger where she wants to throw the lovely hat into the girl's face. What the acorn that's being given to us at the start of the text is a sense of Rosabelle's lack of privilege because she's really, really hungry. We get a sense of her aspiration because of the metaphor of fairy palaces, not that we're studying language at this point. We get a sense of her lack of satisfaction with her place in the world through the almost snobbish description of her fellow passengers. And then this manifests in this sudden upsurge of resentment and jealousy at the end of the extract. And that reaction would not be half as understandable or relatable if we didn't have the slow build-up of characterization earlier in the extract. So you can see that Mansfield drip feeds this notion of the characters' dissatisfaction, their resentment, their lack of privilege, their struggle, so that the conclusion is a much more satisfying resolution of those feelings and ideas. Of course, what I don't want to do is I don't want to suggest that in every single text there is one thing that's going to be foreshadowed. It is open to interpretation, and I want to go back to that definition of perception. It is a specific way of viewing things, and that is your way of viewing things. So if I wanted to, I might not actually see the foreshadowing manifested there. Instead, I could look at other things which are hinted at the beginning of the narrative and then manifested at the end. So for example, early on in the extract again, we've got a description of Rosabelle who says she felt almost stifled when she's on the bus. And that verb stifled means that she feels like bound up, limited, almost like she can't breathe. And whilst that is only a very small line, barely a line, it's a phrase. At the very end of the extract, Rosabelle has that reaction where she wants to throw the hat in that irritating girl's face, but instead she says, it's exquisitely finished off inside, madam. And whilst it is not explicit, what she is doing here is suppressing her feelings, hiding them, keeping them inside, bottling them up. There's no wonder at the start of the text she feels stifled. This is a character who is so limited in their potential. They cannot even express their emotions. They've got to maintain their professionalism, to maintain their job, to maintain what little lifestyle they have. So foreshadowing isn't about finding that one moment, that one clue, that one hint that connects us or helps us to understand the denouement. There is a myriad of different options for you to look at how the writer crafts the structure. So you can see just in those two examples there, foreshadowing is used in a range of different ways in almost every single text that you read, and you'll be able to find the way that makes most sense to you if you look for it. So to summarise, perception in language, in literature, is when we see something that others perhaps might not. It's when we go beyond what everybody will notice. I'm not saying ignore the obvious point. Sometimes there's going to be an obvious point that you want to make, which is also incredibly valuable and has lots of rich connotations and associations which you can discuss. But sometimes there's a subtle point that you might want to make that you think some people might miss that. But that is the moment that really hinges on my understanding of that character or that situation or that setting. So if you can strive to look for those moments, then you'll do well. Going back to the butterfly metaphor, pin down details which bring meaning to you. So really kind of get that detail acknowledged. So pin down details which bring meaning to you, which tell you something about character, setting or circumstance. One of my students said to me a couple of days ago in lesson, Miss, when do we know when we've gone too far? When do we know if we're not reading in too much to this text, doing more than what the writer intended? And I want to address that briefly. When we're looking at a text, when we're reading a text, it's about how you see that text in a way that is personal and precise. In one way, I would advise you to respect the writer's craft, but also to remember that you as the reader are the one with the power to make meaning. You're the one with the book in your hands. You're the one with the mind that is interacting with the words that are on the page. And whatever meaning you derive from that text is valuable. It might not be what the writer intended, and you can acknowledge that. In fact, what you can do is you can compare it to what you think the writer's intentions might have been. But I want you to know that what you think of a text and what you view a text like is incredibly important, and that is what perception is. It is when you have a crystal clear vision of what a text means to you and you can articulately express that.